Hello, my friends. Hey, shall we take a little peek behind the illusion today? I had this, the words come to me, the idea comes to me, and here we are. So we'll see what shows up today. But there is something really beautiful about being curious about what is actually behind this crazy illusion that we're living in as if it is real. What is an illusion? An illusion, it is something that is not really there. It's an image that we perceive in our mind as if it is real. That's why, for instance, an illusion in the desert would be a mirage, right? It looks to your eyes like there's water down the road, but when you come closer and even drive through it, this thing that looks like water, there is no water. It's an illusion. It was a thing happening in our own mind that somehow reflected something that felt real to us, but it wasn't and it isn't. And of course, it's really hard to compare that to the whole world we live in because, like, the water in the desert just disappears as we get closer and we can see, oh my God, there's no water here, but it just looked like there was. But here, as we drive through water, it's very real, right? It makes us wet and cold or warm, whatever it is. So it's a nice comparison to use, but it doesn't fully relate to the way we're living because it's so much more ingrained and I would say embodied for us that it's very hard to create a distance from it where we can really see it for what it is. So if we want to take a peek behind the illusion, how do we do that? First, we need to know that it is an illusion. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything in us that would be curious about looking behind the illusion. But for all of us who have been on the spiritual path for many, many years, maybe many, 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 many years, there's something in us that knows that there is more. There is more than what meets the eye. And it is not what we see that tells us that. It's not like the ocean is telling us, no, I'm not real, or the tree tells us, no, I don't exist, or, the wars, or the government, or this or that. That will not necessarily tell us, hey, I'm just an illusion, I'm not real. It doesn't work like that, does it? So we need to take a little bit of a different stance. And of course, I always go inside and invite you to do the same and find a place that is looking for something different in the world, that is longing for something different than what we are experiencing in the world. And right now it's super intense. So the pull away from the intensity is much bigger now than it used to be because it's almost like you can't really get away from it anywhere anymore. It feels like all the whole illusion is just being, well, it's expanding in one way, but it's also being taken apart and taken away from us. The things that we used to depend on, they may not be there anymore, or they're slowly dissolving. And the things that we were felt safe around, they're not safe anymore. There isn't really a place out there that we could say it's safe here, maybe somewhere deep in the woods. But many of us have also thought about, if this keeps going, I want to move away from this. But more and more, there is not really anywhere to move away from or to because the whole thing is an illusion. The whole thing is a matrix that is built on falsity and images that are being projected out like a hologram. So in order for us to know that there's something different and better, the illusion simply has to dissolve because we have not been able to do it ourselves. We have been too identified and too attached to it that we don't want to let it go. And as long as we have that kind of relationship with the illusion, first of all, we don't know it's an illusion, but we still have a relationship to it where we want to hold on to it. And as long as we want to hold on to it, it's very hard to kind of pull it aside and take a look. What's behind that? And of course, there is no behind it because the veil isn't real anyway, but just using those images that we can kind of follow along and see, well, if I want to look behind the illusion, behind the veil of illusion, how would I do that? Well, the illusion is made up from the mind, the five sense mind. So everything we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think, that is the illusion. Well, then it makes sense that if we want to take a peek behind the illusion, we need to let go of what we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and think, right? That's the illusion. So we have to consciously disengage from it. That means not engage with it. Could help to close our eyes, close our ears, not have anything smelling or tasting right around us, and not necessarily use our feeling senses. So then we have already kind of excluded part of the illusion, and then we still are left with the mind, which is very hard to just put to rest, as you may know. That has a mind of its own, and that is because it is the matrix mind. It has its own mind. This mind is not yours, and it is not mine. And your mind will never, ever admit that to us. So that's why we do always need to take that step back and then be willing, at least, to not let the senses inform us of what's true, and certainly not the mind. So that could leave us in a space, in an empty void space. That is where we want to get to. And that can be done in many ways. And that depends on who we are, how we function, how we relate, what our past is, what our longing is. So there's many ways. And again, of course, meditation is a very, very obvious one with mindfulness, where you start noticing it's whatever is happening, but you're noticing it, and then you can turn your attention back on, well, what is actually noticing this? What is here that is noticing or observing or aware of what my senses are focusing on? So that's when we start taking that step back from the illusion. So it's not really peeking behind the curtain, which is kind of a fun little metaphor, but it is really taking a number of steps back by not engaging in it anymore. Observing it, fine, but letting the mind and the emotions and the senses being all lost in it is probably a good word. Then you're simply lost in the matrix, in the veil of illusion, and you're not able to see behind it. So why don't we just take a moment right now? And it's not going to be a meditation, but just an invitation to consciously just notice what is here around you, in front of you. Just see if you can notice it. You might see a wall, a window, computer. It's kind of really taking a step back and just let yourself notice what is here without knowing what it means, if it has a name, if it has an emotional engagement for you. It's really just it's really like taking a step back, take a breath, get into your body, and just allow yourself just to notice. It's a very good beginning step if this is new to you. If this is not new to you, which it probably isn't for most here, but it probably will be for some. So then you can just remember to do this maybe more often, especially with what's going on in the world. And you may notice that you have been very engaged and lost in the world. So here's an opportunity. Take a deep breath and just take a step back and just notice, what the news is telling us, what all the podcasts, the newspaper, the YouTubers. You can just take a step back and you just observe it. You don't need to believe any of it or not believe any of it. Maybe just a little reminder that, okay, this is something I'm observing with my senses. So that is the illusion. That is not the real thing. It's like, oh, I could take another breath. I don't know what it is. I don't know what is true or what is real. But I can just take another deep breath and just observe it all. I can even just observe how my mind wants to know what it all is, what's going on, where it's all going to go. See, that's all happening here. Everything that we're talking about is just all happening in here, and that is the matrix. So we're basically observing the matrix, the false matrix, the false light. And then little by little, we can just rest back into that part of us that is basically observing. And then that is where we are beginning to peek behind the veil by just letting go of the veil, even if it's just a little bit. And then you'll notice there's actually something here that is observing it all. It's not part of it all, it's observing it all. And becoming the observer can be a very powerful step on our spiritual path. There's always many steps. There's the next, letting go more and more. But this is a very good one, especially with what's happening in the world. The illusion is really raising its ugly head more than ever. So we can just observe that and just do our best to not engage in it. Just observing it, taking another deep breath, and you let yourself sink back a little bit, kind of behind your eyes, pulling back from all that stuff out there. You let yourself land here. This is one way to take a peek behind the illusion. Again, there's probably many other ones. There's many spiritual traditions, teachings, and they all have their ways. This is a simple one that we can just practice a little bit. And I would say specifically when it really has to do with what's going on in the world, because that's when we keep losing ourselves, like the observer is getting lost in there. And then we lose sight of who we truly are and what is real and what we are really longing for. And then, as if it feels good just to be and observe, maybe like now, if you have the time and space to do it with me here, you might start noticing that things calm down a little bit. And you might start looking at it. It's like, what is that? What is going on there when I'm not engaging in it? You know, little by little, it starts looking pretty crazy, not really aligning with who we are when you just take that step back and just observe. There's kind of a softness, a resting, presence. There's a presence here. This is peeking behind the veil. It's super, super simple, but it's so challenging for most of us because nobody ever showed us. We were always being taught, to go out there and do things and change things. And, you need to do this to get enlightened, or you need to do that to heal. And that's all fine. But there's also this simplicity in the midst of it all. You can take another deep breath. I just notice when I'm here, there's just deep breaths. They just take themselves. I don't need to take a deep breath. When I'm in here, then the breath is naturally deep because I'm not engaging out there, which, aggravates my nervous system maybe. So here's a little invitation for all of us to take these little moments and take a deep breath and do your best to just observe what you're experiencing. And there's a little shift that happens with that, where you start looking at things in a way you haven't looked at it. You literally start looking at the world more as an observer instead of somebody who is lost in it. And then we become the presence that is everywhere, that we just have lost sight of because our sight was lost in the world. If you have time right now, and if you have been following along here today, I would say, why don't you take a little more time if you can feel it right now? And just enjoy this little time in yourself as the observer with full permission. I know you don't need it, but full permission to not engage in the world, even if it's just for a few minutes in the beginning. Just to start getting used to meeting life from a different state of being.